Thank you. Thank you very much, Selçuk Hocam. Actually, it's a great pleasure for me to be also presenting this antimicrobial paint coatings and polymers. That is what we learned from the COVID, actually, the importance of the antimicrobial paints and coatings, because for a long time I've been working on these polymeric materials and some coatings, but unfortunately people are hesitating to discuss on the antimicrobial coatings due to some unnecessary concerns. As we discussed also previously, just before the meeting, that is the Minister of Health and some other authorities, they are thinking that we will manage the people either on a different way, but it's not the case actually. I will try to convince you in this term why we need this antimicrobial paints and coatings. Before I start to my talk, actually, I'd like to thank the organizing committee that's giving me a chance to talk to you, and also the sponsors, because of if there's no sponsors, it's very difficult to conduct this type of conferences. So I'd like to thank them again in the presence of you and also all the audience. And with that, I'd like to start with what we learned from the COVID. Actually, we learned cross-contamination term. Cross-contamination is known a lot in the hospital-associated infections, which Dr. Victoria from Congresi, she mentioned on her talk as well. And if this contamination and the cases are widely exposed to the people, then we call them pandemic. And if it's the limited people are affected, we call them epidemic, which is most on the food poisons and etc. But the hospital-associated infections are really a big issue. Until now, many people, they did not concern on the surface cleaning, but only the hand cleaning, they thought it's gonna help, but it is not the case. By the pandemic, we learned that the hand cleaning is important because we can transfer all the microorganisms by touching. And we learn also using the face mask, because in air, there are particles like we do not see them, about the 5 to 500 micron size, and they can carry the viruses and the bacteria, because viruses and bacteria, they are much more smaller than the air, the dust. So that's why we're using the mask to protect ourselves. But the same dust, at the same time, they can easily settle down the walls and floors and etc. And the microorganisms survive there for a long time. And also the disinfectant use. Many people now learn to use the surface disinfectant. Earlier time, we were using them for only the bathroom, but it's needed to be used all over the surfaces, because microorganisms can leave the surface for a long time. So that's why, to prevent the cross-contamination, to prevent the microorganism not to grow on the surface, you need to have antimicrobial coating. Actually, as Professor Yusuf mentioned in the previous section, the academicians usually they look at the literature, how the people are dealing with those issues. And one of I did search on the Web of Science, which is academic literature on the cross-contamination. For the health sector, there are 21,000 articles. Only 1,000 of them is the hand hygiene, and 70 of them is surface hygiene, and the 40 of them air hygiene. And similarly in food sector, like we have 8,000 articles, only 32 hand hygiene, and the 8 of them is surface hygiene. On the HVAC sector, indoor air quality, then 10,000 articles, only the 44 of them is the surface hygiene. Means people still, they are not taking much of care on the surface hygiene, but during the pandemic, we learned that the surfaces requires to be really antimicrobial, antiviral. And how big is the problem? We learned from coronavirus, it causes the 20, 50 million people hospitalized. And out of those, 5 million is death. It's a very big number. And similarly, on the hospital-associated illness, also Dr. Victoria mentioned that in US, there are almost nearly 1.7 million people are hospitalized, and there's 98,000 of them are died. So the hospital care, the caused infections is a very big problem. And a long time ago, we started working on this subject, so we developed some coatings as well. And similarly, foodborne illness, that the World Health Organization says that since it's an epidemic, like 200 to 620 million people, they get ill, but only 420,000 is dead, similar to indoor air. So I'm trying to convince you that the surface, the antimicrobial surface is very important. If you do not have very clean and antimicrobial surface, then you will have cross-contamination problem all over the world. I will pass through very fast on the reason, on how this hospital care, nosocomial infections, hospital-associated infections. If you are hospitalized, out of 100 people, 7 people out of 100, they can get the infection in hospital. This 7 is the high-income countries and 10% lower than medium-income countries. If you are hospitalized and staying in the intensive care unit, and 1 out of 3 is get the infections, and their treatment takes very long time. And those infections actually, 1 over 4 is about the antimicrobial resistant bacteria. It is also the big issue, and the microorganism can generate the resistance to the antibiotics. That's the big problem. Similar to foodborne illness, again, there are a bunch of microorganisms. They can grow on the food, and they can hospitalize the people, like salmonella, listeria, and etc. It's also a big issue, and it covers all over the world. In indoor air, similarly, there are 7 million of people each year, they get affected by indoor air, and that is also cost like allergy and health cost. It's in US, it's a big, huge number. Only these numbers, we can find them available in the literature. That's why I'm giving the example for the US, and that is cost them in $18 billion in a yearly. And it's very common. You can see that each walls, you can get some molds and fungi, and they generate out of allergenic reactions. So that's why we need the surface with the antimicrobial properties. So this is, I will summarize them, that the microorganism can survive in air as well as in the small crack, micro crack on the surface. These are the SEM images on the left-hand bottom, and you see the scratches on the surface, and 10 micron diameter of the scratch. They carry a lot of microorganisms like E. coli, like 2 micron in size, and there are a bunch of them hidden there. So even if you clean the surface, you may not clean all of them, just they are hiding, and after you take the cleaner, then they start to growing again. So the cleaning itself is not enough. You have to use the disinfectant, but most of the disinfectant, they are releasing the alcohol or aldehyde or chlorine. They cause some lung problems when you use them very frequently. And if you use some disinfectant and they mix with the water, wastewater, like triclosan, then they generate the microorganism generate the resistance to that. So they are no more effective as an antimicrobial agent. So that's why to use disinfectant a lot, then they can cause the microbial resistance. That resistance also causes the antibiotic resistant problem. And the World Health Organization says that the antibiotic resistant system or antimicrobial resistance can cause the 10 million deaths in 2050. That is one of the largest death toll after the cancer, actually, or before cancer. So the disinfection and cleaning is very important on the surface. So we mentioned that the conventional disinfectants are small molecules and they need to be applied frequently, and they may release the toxic metals into the environment. In case of the food packaging, also they may diffuse into the foods, and similar for the water treatment. So to overcome those, the polymeric agents, they are non-volatile and they are more safer to use. And do we need really antimicrobial surfaces? Yes, we mentioned that the cross-contamination happens for carrying the material from the surface to the other patient, like in hospital, and the frequent touch surfaces being touched by healthy people, they can transfer the microorganism to the others. So recently, actually, the community, they start significantly developing the antimicrobial coatings and for surfaces to tackle this deadly problem, actually. That's why in Turkey also we are doing that in our research group as well. What is antimicrobial polymers? I will give you a little bit definition on that. Just any of the large variety of the polymers that are used to destroy the microorganism or prevent the microorganism development on the surface. I mean, not to give the good environment to microorganism to survive there. So that's why we use antimicrobial the coatings. They can kill the microorganism by contact, or then they will not allow the microorganism to develop themselves. So there are lots of places they use antimicrobial polymers on healthcare issues, biomedical devices, on food sector for packaging, edible film, and environmental science and agriculture, water purification, and in some cases it's used in fabrics. But we did not see much of example on the paints. And I'm sure recently after having this pandemic and affecting all the people, and the hygiene is more important on the surface, because many people may thought that what happened if the wall is not antimicrobial. Yeah, it requires, because the dust can travel everywhere and can stick on the surface and the microorganism can grow there. So that is important for paints, needs to be antimicrobial as well. And if we classify the antimicrobial polymers, we can say in 4 different topics, like one in the polymers that inherently antimicrobial. I will talk to that a little bit. And incorporation of agents into polymer paints as an additive, like antimicrobial additives, that's also been covered by Dr. Victoria and Congress, she mentioned. And I will just give some example on that. Immobilization of the antimicrobials to the polymer by ionic or covalent bonding. We do also research on this and designing the binder with the antimicrobial properties, and other topics which we widely use on the commercialized product, like coating and absorbing the antimicrobial onto the surfaces. Here is some schematics, and you see that when you have the antimicrobial surface, then the kill mechanism is the contact kill. The living microorganism can touch surface and they will die, and then they remove. And you see on the right-hand side, just the green color is the fluorescence microscope of the Pseudomonas on the surface, which is there alive. When they dead, they become the red dead cell. So it's a miniaturization is the same phenomena there. And inherently antimicrobial polymers, usually you can see the chitosan, and they're obtained from the seashells and being used for different purposes, especially in agriculture and the food sector. But the problem of this chitosan, you cannot make them very good film to use them as a coating material. But their effectiveness is on the destroying the bacteria cell or lipid layer or virus cell on the envelope viruses cell. They destroy the lipid layer and they activate the psychological activities in the bacteria. Another example on the antimicrobial one is the tannic acid, curcumin, catechin, or procyanin. Those are also the organic materials and the natural materials obtained from the plants and extract from them. They also can be used as an additive, but mostly they are not heat stable and they could be used in the water-based system or solution-based system. They can use. Those are antimicrobial polymer inherently. And you can make some derivatives of like chitosan with the catechol derivatives. And also you can use them, some cationic monomer, you can combine them. So you may do some derivatives of those type of polymers. The other class of the antimicrobial polymers is the incorporation of agents directly into the polymer. In this case, usually we do use the antimicrobial property of the inorganic metals like the silver, titanium, zinc, copper. And you may heard a lot on the titanium dioxide and silver as antimicrobial agent, but to have those metals to be effective in the system, in the matrix, they need, you have to have the sizes smaller than the 10 nanometers, as also mentioned this morning from the previous speaker. And you can decorate them by using solid chemistry onto the either halloysite or zeolite or something. This is one of the TM pictures in our studies. We can decorate easily titanium dioxide, silver into the halloysite nanotubes about 11 or 9 nanometers to 60 nanometers. And this, by doing this methodology, you can coat this particles, silver, copper, and zinc, also titanium dioxide. These can be added into the polymer matrix about 1 to 3%. But the issue again, you need to have, since you have the contact kill mechanism, you need to have your materials distributed very nicely in the polymer structure and to get the benefit of those nanoparticles on the antimicrobial side. And one can also use these nanotubes as a carrier. We are using some natural oils, antimicrobial oils like carvacrol, and filling them into the nanotubes, and those nanotubes we can fill around 17% of carvacrol in nanotubes, and we can load those nanotubes onto the polymer and have the antimicrobial polymer. This is also a good way of carrying the antimicrobial agent onto the polymer. And you can immobilize the antimicrobials for covalent bonding. Like yesterday we listened also Troy that the benzoisothiazolone, they immobilize the benzoisothiazolone by using the complexing with the zinc oxide, zinc chloride, and those are also being used. But the mostly developed system is the quaternary ammonium compound. They are very active and wide spectrum chemicals. You can bond them into the polymer backbone by quaternization the nitrogen compound. I think I'm running out of time, just will speed up. Just you can see in the literature anhalamine acrylamide polymers. This is heterocyclic compound. You can quaternize, and also you can activate them with bleach and they inactivated by the bacteria, Or what we've done, actually, we do the emulsion polymerization of the styrene acrylate by using the quartan amine compound. We can obtain the inherently the quartan as polymer, and they can kill the microorganism on the liquid media as well as on the surface. And by doing this, we can design polymer in a way that having some hydrophobic nature and also some censoring point for the antifouling system. Just this sensor detects the destroy the enzymes on the microorganism not to touch on the surface, but at the same time when they get into touch surface, the cationic group works. And we test them in sea environment for 6 months, and we did get almost 80% reduction on the antifouling. And the other class of the antimicrobial, you can do the coating on absorbing antimicrobial onto the surface. And this is also most of those antimicrobial agents and polymers I'm mentioning here, they are mostly commercial material. And this time we use the silane chemistry, ethoxysilane with the quartan ammonium group on it. You can coat them onto the glass substrate or any substrate. And here's there's AFM images of that the cationic group that in non-coated slides, we can see the microorganism easily can grow and just live there. And they coated glass, then they start to killing the microorganism. As you see the small bumpers, they are the dead bacteria actually on the surface, same staphylococcus and the E. coli. This is not our research. This is done Langmuir lately back in 2018. But these are our results that in surface, when you have the cationic group, you need to have certain amount of quaternized nitrogen, like 0.45 atomic percent, which you can detect them by XPS and on the 401 electrovolt situation. This silane functionalization can be done with many different groups, like you can make the fluorinated or hydrophobic, you can make the ethylene glycol or hydrophilic, or Zwitter ionic structure, quartan, etc. By doing this, you can design new polymer coatings for the antimicrobial properties. So these are some results of coated surfaces, and I will go fast in here because time passes by. And if you add this material onto the EPDM rubber, you can get 99+99 convert that value. This could be staphylococcus, E. coli, or if you apply them on high density polyethylene, again, you can get very high antimicrobial properties, or you can add them into the powder coating and add on the dye under this hospital bed, then you can get the antimicrobial properties as well. Or you can coat the walls and panels in the hospital case. Again, you'll have the 99.99% activity on the system. Or you can, this sol gel coating, you can coat them onto the air filter for the during the air purification. Then you'll end up with, again, for in this case, we take the Legionella, is again the log 3, 99.97% of that ratio. So I try to convince you that we need to have antimicrobial surfaces, and even during the pandemic we needed, but from now on, again, we need it more because the new version of the SARS viruses, they contain 50 mutations, and at least 31, the spike protein is more, they are infecting the human cell. And if you look at the Delta variant, they have the 2 mutations, and the Beta variant has 3. But in that since Omicron, they have the 10 or 15 spike proteins, they can destroy the human cell. So these are actually recent news from the CNN News. So we need to have at least, I mean, definitely for the antimicrobial surface for future as well, for now and for future. With that, I thank you for your attention, and if any question, I'd be happy to answer to them as well. Thank you.
About the functions and the activities of antibacterial paints and coatings. If there are some questions that we can just directly ask Mr. Menceloğlu. Is there any question to him? If there is no question, I have a question. Actually, when we are talking about this antibacterial or microbial paints and coatings, how long the antibacterial effect remain on the surface? Because you know, mainly the consumer cannot realize if the activities is disappeared on the surface. Is there any relation?
Sure. I mean, this is when you add those materials, and yesterday also they mentioned there is some additives to add into the polymer or paint emulsion or paint formulation. Depends on their size. They can migrate onto the surface, especially for the additives like nano additives like clay and silver and etc. They can be released by time by having the abrasion, but then still, if it's in the matrix, they can remain. The rest of the things remain in the matrix, so it shouldn't be any problem on the lifetime of the antimicrobial agent. This is true for the volatile or some degraded antimicrobial agents. When they face with the microorganism, they also destroy themselves. But it's not the case. If you add those additives, non-volatile additives, and also if you can bond them onto the polymer backbone, you can, I mean, they have the same lifetime of your paint because they are already embedded into the matrix. In some cases, some of them, they are more functional. They can also react with the polymer chain in the paint.
Actually, Mr. Marshall Boucher is also asking similar question, and therefore I think it is not needed asking again. Thank you very much, Marshall. And is there any other question? If it is not, I have also one more.
Sure.
We have seen also in the market some anti-COVID products, and then we see some commercial, and then shortly this commercial is stopped. What do you think? Is it correct the regulators stop the giving commercial or using this as a marketing tool in the market?
Yeah, that is true. I mean, for the antimicrobial agents and antimicrobial coatings or disinfectant, they have some regulated cells. But because European Union also, they say we do have the same regulation rules we apply here. European Union says that if you add something onto your material and to make them antimicrobial, you can claim them, you can say them, okay, if you test it against the COVID-19, you can easily tell them it's tested against the COVID-19 and prevent it. So it should be allowed, those advertisements. And also this morning we heard from Dr. Victoria, there are a bunch of product in the US they are selling as an antiviral product. And this is not necessarily to be directing the consumer on the different way, just to giving them a good sense of feeling that they have protected. Of course, when we say also yesterday, Troy person, he mentioned that we are not telling them not to clean the surface. Of course, you have to clean the surface. You have to take care of this. You have to take the other actions as well. This antimicrobial or antiviral viral coatings is like an insurance. I mean, why we do health insurance by ourselves? To protect ourselves for unexpected situations. Same thing for the antimicrobial paint. As I mentioned that on the surface, and if you have micro crack, microorganism can grow there. Why not you have that surfaces not to allow them to grow and you cross contamination? So I'm not not supporting the government idea. Actually, this is gonna be. It needs to be advertised in a way that, and also you can put the condition to the consumer and user that's not to. I mean, you have to do your regular cleaning and etc.
Okay. There is another question from Fulya Gülmez, and she is asking if this antimicrobiological effect is tested in marine conditions or not.
Yeah, it's tested in the lab conditions, but generated with the incorporated microorganism, falling microorganism into the pool. It's not the real marine, but we do have the marine tested plates, and thanks to also the Polysan company, they help us a lot on that. And there's some other plates we can discuss, the amount of the hard shell, how much is adhere on the surface, how much is not. But this is not the case of this talk, so I didn't bring up. We can talk them if they need it. They can send me an email.
Okay, actually time is flying. Half an hour is over. But there are also some questions coming. It always happens like that. From the beginning, there are less questions, and then some more question comes. Actually, the audience can send the questions by email, and then Mr. Menceloğlu, I'm sure he will answer your questions by mail and so on. Thank you very much, Yusuf, for your contribution.
Thank you, Selçuk. Thank you very much. Thank you all for listening. Thanks.